Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Can we please ask everybody to start making their way into the venue? We have virtual guests and we are going to start at 10 sharp. We're going to close the doors within the next 2 minutes, so please make your way into the venue so that we can get started. Yeah, no, you've only just arrived, so it's fine.
Sound. One, two.
What we were thinking is that we managed to get. The buyers are in the what's in the brief. Oh sure, so we didn't. That's fine. You know what I wanted to do? I wanted to ask if maybe we don't speak. So let's take the program, then we have got the SOC speaker, and the SOC speaker will do the vote, the message of support and the candle meeting. The gifts, we won't use, we won't do the gifts. We let the gifts at the end when people are walking out with the gifts. Okay. Guys, can we please move in? We're closing the doors. We're closing the doors within the next 2 minutes. It's now 9:56, and we said at 10 o'clock sharp we are going to be starting so that our virtual guests are not kept waiting. Whatever snacks are left, you can always have after the meeting. But please, guys, make your way in right now.
Okay, Devin, give me some background music there, please, man. I'll turn it. The music is playing. I don't know what music was it.
Thank you, DJ. Thank you, DJ. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Before we start, can I just invite that we fill in the front seats first, such that those who come in later can, instead of coming in front when the program is running, please. It just helps facilitate the program. There's no greatness linked to the chair in front. It's just a seat, the same like any other seat. Don't say there are big people or small people. It's just a seat. Let's fill the front row, please. Thank you. Another two, there's three in the front. We just makes it for convenience. Okay. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Neba Kaleni. Although in the program they've written Ari, I am in a polygamous marriage, married to UKZN and Ari. So I belong to both the states, so that's the first thing. Thank you for joining us, and I see there are those who also have joined us online. Welcome to this World AIDS Day commemoration. And the theme that has been chosen by the committee is equalize, level the playing field, which is important. But sometimes we forget where we come from, and also why the World AIDS Day. We have started with deaths, and HIV was like a death sentence people were afraid of. There were many who were affected, and many who passed on. And we do World AIDS Day as part of commemorating and remembering those who fought the struggles before us and sometimes succumbed. We also remember that AIDS became a reason why some were killed and murdered or assassinated, whichever the ways you can use. And so we respect their bravery, those who came out before. It was difficult to come out and say, I'm HIV positive, and people would hate you and kill you for no reason. So for that reason, before we start, I'm going to just change the candle lighting, that we want to light the candle, and it should burn throughout this occasion as a memory, not as the last. So I'm going to invite Nontobeko, our SRC comrade, to help us to light the candle. That's been an honor given to you. And after this, I will ask us to stand and just have a moment of silence before we then talk about the program for today. Over to you, Nontobeko. We can stand. Let's just observe a moment of silence, whether you close your eyes or what, just for a moment. Siyabakumbula. Thank you very much. As part of the organizing team for this day, is that there have been many activities during the year that are HIV related, and it's a kind of an important moment in the various partners that are here within the university, within Drill, Santhe, Ari, Caprisa, Head. There's lots of things going on. It's just a moment that they can share with us. So there are no PowerPoint presentations. Africans are great orators, so we can tell our stories as we hear. So just to reflect, so the various speakers that will come to the front will kind of share their perspectives from the work they've done. The names are on the program. What I would request each speaker, like I've done, just say who you are, which organizations are you working with, and then you tell us your story. Our time is limited. I think 10 minutes is long enough for some, especially when you're not guided by slides. One of the reasons we're not using slides, we've got beautiful ladies here who are sign language interpreters, such that we don't bombard them with complex science and terminology, such that they can share the message across. And so that's part of the reason we're doing that, and we're therefore asking speakers that you be mindful. If you are a fast speaker, but just be mindful that they need to keep up with you in the work they're doing. And so that's the idea of Equalize. And so without wasting time, I'm going to invite our boss, Professor Busisi Wengama, to welcome us.
Thank you very much, Professor Qaleni Sanbonani. World AIDS Day is part of an international and national initiative to remember our commitment to HIV prevention, treatment, care, and support. All projects and programs are geared towards the achievement of the goals for strategic planning to address HIV and AIDS management in higher education institutions. The purpose of this event today is really to share feedback from HIV conference in Spain especially, also to discuss critical experiences, propose interventions and strategies for further implementation, be they biomedical as well as psychosocial, and to forge partnerships to improve service rendering in relation to HIV and AIDS-related issues. A word of special welcome also to those who may be joining online. I would like to welcome all of you to this event, where the theme for 2022 World AIDS Day is Equalize, to show solidarity and support for individuals infected and affected by the AIDS pandemic. As Prof. Qaleni has already alluded to, this is a combined event between different partners at UKZN. Most of you would know that UKZN as a whole has been at the forefront of addressing HIV and AIDS issues. So today we've got Sandy, we've got Campus HIV/AIDS Support Unit, Caprisa, Ari.
You may not be able to, but you probably can write your comments and send them to the organizers, and we can refer them to the various speakers. If you address them, they may come back to you. That's the intention. It's a busy day, so we want to keep as much to time as possible. Our next speaker is Professor Bule Magula. As I said, I want the speaker to say which organization they represent and what they do. Thank you.
Good morning, Professor Ngama. Good morning, Professor Qaleni, and good morning, ladies and gentlemen. And so just to start off, my name is Nombudelo Magula. I serve as the head of Division of Internal Medicine here at UKZN. I also serve as a key opinion leader for the International Association for Providers of AIDS Care, usually called IPAC, for eThekwini Municipality. So I'm going to start by painting a background before I give an update, which I've been asked to do on the events of the conference that took place in Spain. And it does touch on a number of points that Professor Ngama has already alluded to. So in terms of background, at the turn of this century, we were devastated by the AIDS epidemic. We fought a very difficult battle, and we all remember how the problem was actually laid at the door of our president, the then President Thabo Mbeki, in terms of his response to the HIV epidemic. Fast forward, as we entered 2020, we had a new devastation that nobody anticipated would occur in our lifetime. This was the COVID-19 pandemic. And the response was different. So with this particular epidemic or pandemic, in addition to the leadership of government, we also had experts drawn in to support the response of government. And we felt satisfied that voices were heard and experts were part of guiding government. But if I can tell you numbers that we need to reflect on, is that right now, South Africa has the largest number of people living with HIV in the world, at more than 8 million people. And if this doesn't worry us, maybe that 8 million doesn't sound like is a big number. The second country to South Africa is sitting at about 2 million. So we have a huge problem. Now look, fast forward to the COVID-19 pandemic. There, in terms of proportion for Africa, South Africa's burden is sitting at 30% of the burden in Africa, 30%, in terms of people that got infected. In terms of people that died, we're sitting at 40%. And with respect to the HIV epidemic, we're sitting at 30% for Africa. So we have to ask ourselves, why is it that when we had a response that we blamed on the president of the country, we're sitting at 30%, and then at the same time now we have experts that are part of decision making. We're sitting at 30% disease burden, 40% mortality. So what is missing? What is missing is we actually do not have the voice of the community in the responses. That is the big missing. And we need to reflect on this. So the conference in Spain is actually Fast Track Cities conference, which in the year 2014, the global leaders recognized that if we are going to win the war against the HIV epidemic, what was needed was the voice of community. And who leads community? It's not, presidents do not lead communities. The people that are elected to lead communities are ward councillors and mayors. So in the year 2014, the UNAIDS, the Fast Track Cities Institute, the International Association for Providers of AIDS Care, UN Habitat, the City of Paris, they came together, and there's a declaration that was signed, Paris Declaration, wherein mayors of cities came together and signed this declaration, committing themselves that they are going to do what needed to be done to get to the end of the HIV epidemic by the year 2030. So this was in 2014, and we know these targets that everybody speaks to, the UN AIDS 1990 targets that had to be met by the year 2020, and now 95 to be met by the year 2025, so that by the year 2030, we can actually say that we have reached the end of AIDS or new infections, new HIV infections. So the conference in October in Spain was actually a fourth conference since 2019. The first one, Fast Track Cities conference, happened in London. The Fast Track Cities that actually brings together cities from across the world. And so we gathered in 2019, and with all cities that are part of the Fast Track Cities initiative globally. There are those that have been identified, and eThekwini municipality is one of 2 cities in South Africa, Johannesburg being the second one. That are one of the 25 cities prioritized to receive assistance to help ending the HIV epidemic. And you can recognize that South Africa is critical to ending the global epidemic. And so eThekwini was represented. We had the district coordinator for the AIDS program. We had, I was part of that as the key opinion leader for eThekwini municipality. We had civil society also, the chairperson for eThekwini, Dr. Sian Zimande, and we also had the program officer for IPAC, Shalom Savant, and also colleagues from Johannesburg were part of this. And so the talks really were geared around what cities across the world are doing. And we shared best practices. Everyone had to, learn from others. And we had, from eThekwini in particular, there were presentations around what eThekwini is doing. A response that is driven from community. We spoke about the Ward AIDS Committee, which is the primary unit in the HIV response, which I think as academics or as members of this community at UKZN, we really need to familiarize ourselves with the activities at ward level, because that is the primary unit. The people that are first responders, when there's no electricity, when there are no services, no water, when there's problems with housing and so on, the first responders are the ward councillors. And so the ward councillors report to the mayor. And in eThekwini, we have a vibrant mayor that is very, very committed to the HIV response. So the work of people living with HIV driving the response themselves. The work that's happening in community level, there's a conversation map that is being used to educate everyone. We need to familiarize ourselves with all of that work. It was presented at this particular conference. And from my perspective, I actually presented on how we responded during the COVID-19 pandemic. Our municipality invested massively in this hospital, Clarewood Hospital, by repurposing it to more than, at a tune of more than 240 million rands. And so we actually used that facility to equalize, we have a problem in South Africa of this hierarchy of the healthcare system that you actually have to complicate before you get better, to the level where, you get the appropriate resources. So through this work at Clarewood Hospital and using digital technology, we were able to connect with people at community level and open up access to specialist care for patients that are at community level. So we presented that, and I also serve, so that was the first plenary, and there was another plenary that was focused at community work, And so there is a commission, a Lancet HIV commission underway. That's commissioners are actually members from across the globe. I'm a member of that commission, and I also chair the subcommittee on social determinants of health. And so there was a conversation about the work that is underway from that commission and the recommendations that we expect to hear. We discussed those perspectives as well. Now, importantly is one of the big activities, I told you about the Paris Declaration that was signed by mayors in the year 2014. Our mayor here in eThekwini also signed that declaration in the year 2014. In this particular conference, there's a new declaration that speaks to community-led responses, putting the community at the center for solutions, that the community is the one that must lead. All of these problems, stigma and discrimination, human rights, equalizing, all of these, we have to have the community leading us, and everybody else follows on what the community is saying. We have to hear the voice of community. So mayors signed this declaration at a reception during the course of the conference. Our mayor, unfortunately, was not able to be at the conference. He has attended other conferences of this nature. We had mayors from Botswana, Lagos, Lusaka, and across the globe. They were part of the conference. This is their conference. And so with our mayor not having been able to be part of the signing of the declaration, arrangements have been made that on the occasion of the World AIDS commemoration in eThekwini, arrangements are made that our mayor, Mayor Kaunda, will be signing this declaration, joining himself with mayors across the globe, committing to respond in a way that is declared in this Sevilla Declaration that speaks to putting community at the center of our responses. I think I can go on forever if I'm allowed, so I will stop here in the interest of time. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Bully. I've been given powers to just do a sign language and say you've got 2 minutes. But thank you very much. That was quite interesting. Please note your points of discussion when that time comes. And now I'm going to invite Professor Tumbindungu to come and address us.
Good morning, Sabonani. Thank you very much, Neba, and it's a great pleasure to be asked to talk here this morning. As I was thinking about World AIDS Day this year, I was thinking about how HIV has impacted our lives, certainly mine. I grew up in I came of age in the 80s, just to give away my age, in rural Kenya, and I would never have imagined that I would end up in South Africa. When I was growing up, the much that I knew about South Africa was about apartheid and what was going on, and the social unrest that was going on in the 80s in South Africa. So it was not until the 1990s when I began to hear about HIV. I probably heard about it probably late 1980s is the first time I heard about HIV, and I had no idea what this was all about. In fact, when I went to university to study veterinary medicine at the University of Nairobi, I still had no clue. In fact, I don't think even our lecturers ever mentioned HIV as an important disease, but clearly things were to change dramatically in the 1990s. And when we started now seeing HIV cases and hearing of people dying of HIV and people living with HIV, it was very difficult in the beginning, obviously, because we didn't have treatment. And, people took AZT as a first drug. But by that time, most people were taking AZT when their CD4 counts were very low, when they were already sick. And most of the people did not survive even when they started taking antiretroviral therapies. But we've come a long way because we moved from that. We went to a situation where people had to take about 30 pills a day if you're living with HIV. And still a lot of people did not survive. But things have changed tremendously. Now you can live a healthy life with HIV. And I think we have to say science has made a difference. So scientific research and the efforts of scientists have borne fruit because we have only one single pill now, and they are very effective. And if you take your medication, you can live with HIV rather comfortably compared to the way it used to be. But I think we also need to remember that this would not have been possible without, it's not just the scientists. It's possible to have an intervention and have it on the shelves, as we have seen very recently with COVID, where we have a vaccine that can prevent people from getting serious illness, but there's a lot of people who are not taking this medication. So I think it has taken the coming together of communities and us working together, whether we are scientists, whether we are community activists. I think the story of HIV is a story of people coming together. And there used to be a lot of stigma in the beginning. There's still stigma if you're living with HIV, we know that, and the problems have not all gone away. But we have come a long way, I think. People can stand in front and say that they're living with HIV and not suffer discrimination and not suffer a lot of negative social consequences because just because they have an illness. So the topic today is equalize, and I think we can be grateful that we have medication that is freely available to everybody, and that we have made a lot of progress. But I think we also need to remember that HIV/AIDS is not over. And I'm reminded of a study that we did at the Africa Health Research Institute, and by the way, I forgot to mention in the beginning that I'm from the Africa Health Research Institute and also from the University of KwaZulu-Natal. But there's this study that we did at the Africa Health Research Institute in northern KwaZulu-Natal. And basically what that study shows is that if you look at people between the ages of 25 and 44, 60% of females in Mkanyakunde district, 60% are living with HIV, and about 40% of males in that age group, which means that we have a lot of people who are going to have to take antiretroviral medication for the rest of their lives. And I don't think that this is an acceptable situation. Not only do they have the burden of taking antiretroviral medication daily for the rest of their lives, but also we still have unacceptably high numbers of HIV infections. We have about 1.5 million people who acquired HIV, I think by UNAIDS estimations last year. So our targets for where we should be in terms of reducing the number of new HIV infections is still very high. And this is despite the fact that we know how to prevent HIV. We know that if you use condoms, if you take your medication, if you're living with HIV, if you use pre-exposure prophylaxis, it has 99% chance reduction in transmission of HIV. So we have the tools to fight HIV, But these tools are also not necessarily optimal. They are not easy to use because you have to use them every day. And so we need to move to the next phase in the fight against HIV. First, we must increase our efforts to make sure that people are aware of HIV prevention technologies that we now have and HIV treatment. And we must make sure that nobody gets left behind in terms of using HIV prevention technologies as well as HIV treatment for those who are living with HIV. But we must not stop here in terms of our quest, and we must develop the next technologies to cure HIV. We must not stop here. And in the past it used to be difficult to say that you can actually cure HIV, but I truly believe that just as it was almost impossible 30 years ago to think that you could treat HIV with just one pill or even an injection, we will get to a place where we can actually cure HIV or have people go into remission. And then finally, I'm the program director for a network called the Sub-Saharan African Network for TB and HIV Research Excellence, which is a capacity building program. And when I look in this room, it seems to me that the majority of people sitting here are certainly younger than me. And it is the young people who are the future. They're the future of this country. They're the future of this continent. And we must equip these young people. We must empower young people here to dream big so that not only do we eliminate HIV, but also so that when we have the next epidemic, we will be at the forefront of developing scientific approaches, scientific ways to fight this disease. So we must equalize not only in providing services, but particularly in scientifically empowering the young people so that they can eliminate HIV and so that they can eliminate the next epidemic. So to the young people who are here, I would like you to dream big so that the next drugs, the next vaccines are actually developed from this continent, and we don't have to sit here waiting for others to develop these interventions for us. Thank you all very much.
Thanks, Tumbi. The next speaker is my leader, Mr. Mdletshe. Let's welcome him. He's gonna tell you why he's my leader.
I hope all of you can sing because this is a commemoration. So let me sing then. Kukudla menu zulale ngoxolo. Kukudla menu zulale ngoxolo wena. Kukudla menu zulale ngoba kudala uzabala, kudala uzabala. Kudala uzabala, kudala uzabalaza, kukudla mina uzulala. Ngeke. Thank you very much, Prof. Galeni. Good morning, Prof. Ngama, and also good morning to my fellow speakers. Igama lami nguPatrick Mdletshe from Caprisa. But also I'm the Provincial Civil Society Chairperson in KwaZulu-Natal and the co-chairperson of the Provincial AIDS Council in KwaZulu-Natal. The challenge here, I'm going to preach to the converted. The good thing here at the moment, I haven't seen those slides, those numbers, so we are talking today. Also, I don't want to bombard you with all that either. But I want to call this, we are actually at the last mile of HIV and AIDS, since UNAIDS said we need to end AIDS by 2030. That particular mile it's a very, very important mile. Probably, just to be exact, don't count this year, to, next year, we are 7 years from that 2030. So then the question then that we need to ask ourselves, what should we do then to make our concerted effort really, really count? Maybe we need to reflect a little bit back then to say, what have we done better or what have we done great? One of those good things that we have done as a country, one of it, I'm not going to go back, because if I go back, I'll start from 2004 in April when we initiated the first person on treatment. Then that was a really, really new dawn. Some of us, we said back then, maybe the war in HIV and AIDS is going to end. But I did not know that in 2008, it was just a beginning of a serious fight and a serious war after that, because also there was also a implication from the government that says it's a malicious compliance. They were just doing it because we're putting too much pressure from the government. So one of those things that we've done great, the test and treat program, that was one of the greatest things ever that we have done. But however, it got its own challenges. Part of the challenges, we are driven by numbers and not quality. Because of that, we've initiated so many people on treatment. Probably by now we are sitting, depending where you're reading, but somewhere 4.7, 4.6 million on treatment, which is great, meaning people, they're living longer, people are not dying, people. So we're living longer now. But other part that, or other story that we don't talk about is the fact that people also, they live longer to continue to infect others. Why are we saying that? Now we know that people are living longer, but they are HIV, they are not HIV suppressed. These are some of the challenges. We have improved the quality of life. People are no more sick, but also the statistics are telling us that at least 60% of people that are currently hospitalized, this is 2017, 2018, were people that were once initiated on ARVs. That is why then I'm saying people are living longer to continue to infect others. We also understand now the challenges that we are faced with. If really we are saying we are committed in ending AIDS in 2030, probably the president need to start to talk the real language. Part of that language is an employment of young people, because we know what are the drivers of HIV and AIDS. In 2016, when we were crafting the National Strategic Plan, I was in UKZN in Pietermaritzburg consulting the young people, because I was so passionate in saying I want to involve everyone and make sure that I want to hear everyone what they are saying. Young people said to me, actually I was talking about the blessers and blessees. We understand that we must do away with blessers, but blessers, they buy us hairs, they do our nails and all that. Then if we take away the blessers, then what are we putting in place? Up until today, I mean, developing now another new NSP, I haven't gone back and give the answer what we're going to put back. Meaning we need new lenses in understanding HIV and AIDS epidemic. We do not need to use the tradition as we used to say HIV, it is this, HIV, it is that. Unlike in 2008 to 1995, when we say HIV, it is a black woman, but today HIV have redefined itself amongst young women. The 1990 strategy also gave us that particular hope and a rallying point then to say from here moving forward, as leaders globally, where are we actually moving? But the quality part is still in question. So we need to ensure that we do something about the quality, meaning the pre and post counseling, not just to be driven by numbers. We always also need to thank scientists and the work that they've done to make sure that we have a lot of good biomedical interventions. These part of these biomedical interventions, sometimes they are poorly implemented or poorly explained. Part of that, which we haven't come into terms with, is a question of PrEP. PrEP is one of the best things ever that happened in our lifetime. But then how then to start to explain that you are HIV positive, you're taking ARVs, you are HIV negative, you're taking ARVs. Those are kind of the dilemma that we need to also to think hard then to say, how then do we put the language around that? So community first, even in such great interventions that we are actually doing with our communities. We have actually not done well in retention and care. I'm sure you already know that. I'm not going to bore you with that one. But the really challenge is with the children. We are not doing well with the children. There are a lot of children that were born HIV positive or either seroconverting to be HIV positive again. And some of the children, they are reaching the age of 16, they're being taking treatment, and then they are not being disclosed. They do not even know why they're taking this treatment. These are the real challenges that our people are faced with. Since the falling of Ikomanani, sometime I don't even know when was it, Prof. We do not have a public mass movement kind of a strategy that is educating our people. There's a little bit of a complacency and thinking what people understand HIV. HIV changes every day. How do we know that there's that complacency? The 2020 actually revealed that, because if you look at the number of young people that fell pregnant on that particular year, there were condoms. And our children are falling pregnant again. What is it that we are missing? That is why then I'm saying we need new lenses in understanding HIV, because things are actually changing. But the public mass education is key and is very, very important. The behavioral change is one animal that we do not want to talk about at the moment. When you talk about the behavioral change, most of the research that we have in the country, we are looking mostly at the biomedical interventions. But then what are we doing about studying the actual behavior? We know what are the contributing factors, but we do not understand the behavior. Part of that behavior, and thank God for that I'm a man, I don't get pregnant. Why men are afraid of needles? Why? Why sabukjov? So a lot of men did not vaccinate because they were scared of needles. Why men are not circumcised? Those are some of the real questions that we need to be grappling with. Also, we need to understand the choices of young people. In early days, young people were afraid of getting pregnant and also afraid of HIV. But things have changed all of a sudden. Young people are afraid of getting pregnant because they're going to be seen, but then they are not afraid of getting HIV. So what is it that we do not understand with our society? Then in this last mile, then part of the thing that probably we may need to do, we need more effort on researching on behavioral change, more regimens in terms of HIV, in terms of ARVs, because the lines that we have, some of people, there's something called savage therapy, where doctors sit down and then they say, maybe let's put this one together, then let's give you, then maybe this one will work, maybe this won't. Maybe that is a kind of fight that we need to push. We need to localize. The Prof is threatening me. We need to localize our HIV response. Part of that localizing is also to understand HIV epidemic itself at the what level, as the Prof said. Furthermore, also understand who is infected and where is the epidemic in that particular what, and then respond respectively. But also the last one will be, we need to fund our own HIV. At the moment, large sums of money are coming from overseas. A revolution around that will be government funding our own HIV program. I'm not talking about ARV because 80% of that is coming from government, but if you look at the local funding to civil society, it's very, very minimal. Then if PEPFAR, Global Fund, can take their money away, only God knows what will happen. Amandla.
You heard him, he's my leader. Thank you very much. I'm just gonna spend a few minutes to talk about the work we are doing on traditional medicine and with traditional healers. Let me state this, that this program started here in this medical school in the year 2000. When the medical school decided that there's a need to educate our medical students about aspects of traditional medicine and how to work with understanding that their patients may come from a healer to a doctor, or leave the doctor and go to a healer, or sometimes it happens in the hospital. Whilst the patient is in the ward, the family brings a brown bottle of Smirnoff and something wrapped up in ilanga, and the nurse behaves like they didn't see anything. So you might find that there is a co-management of a patient, but it's not a written code, and so that's how the work started. But then healers, in starting that work, there was already at that time a lot of stories that healers are telling their patients to sleep with virgins and all of those sort of things. And of course, when you talk to healers, they say, but these scientists or journalists, they never show us the face of that healer, but it's a rumor that goes around, but they never name the person in their location, in their address. And so they were feeling offended in a sense. And secondly, they were saying, but you guys are being trained on HIV. There are a lot of programs, courses but there's nothing focused on us. And so we were fortunate, even then mentioning PEPFAR, that we got a grant from PEPFAR, and we trained in 6 districts, 3 districts at the first, but that expanded to 6 districts of working with traditional healers at a ward level, integrating them into the structures of the local HIV. Of course, even now in all HIV structures, there is a healer in the AIDS Council, Provincial AIDS Council, and up to national. But there's never been accompanied by a program that is aimed at empowering them to work with the public health in caring for patients with HIV. Of course, test and treat came and of course killed a lot of that initiative, because at that time it was a referral for testing, and then they continued to look after patients. They still look after them. I think there will be work that we're doing with Prof. Bule Magula here in eThekwini to understand the care that traditional healers give to patients who are on antiretroviral treatment. And that work is ongoing. We hope next day probably we'll release some data. I'm saying that because that is work that is ongoing, and it's not about treatment, it's about care, providing care and wellness services to those people in communities. However, when you work with traditional healers, we did not intend at beginning to look at their products, their medicines, because it's a serious intellectual property. But then they came to us as we have this relationship of trust to say, hey, can you test this thing for me? That's the word, unghlolele. And so we began to get into the program now of evaluating traditional medicine. It's a complex program because I was never trained in drug development. So you start from scratch. I'm not a virologist, so I used to trouble Prof. Sandungu here to say, hey, can you help me here to do these things? So we've been collaborating with a number of stakeholders. Of course, some of these land you in trouble, because one of the healers I worked with at the beginning loved the media so much, loved to market themselves. So you gave them the first set of results, in vitro laboratory test tubes. And then the next thing is on SAFM, is on 702, is so everywhere. And people thinking I'm doing a clinical trial on HIV, which was not. So you learn some lessons about that. But we've gone beyond that. We've been working solidly, funded by our South African government, the Department of Science and Innovation, to the extent now that we are preparing to conduct a phase 1 clinical trial next year on a product from this province and indigenous herbs from this province. They are not only very potent antiviral compounds in that, but we are also seeing evidence that it can probably reverse the latent virus So we know when you're taking antiretrovirals, the virus in the blood is cleared, but it can remain in tissues resident there for a long time, a reservoir. So that's part of what we're chasing now, to see that we can clear that. And so when we do a phase 2 clinical trial, we're going to be looking at those kind of endpoints probably in 2024. We are, of course, I can't predict what the results will say, but we'll do the work to generate that data. We think it will be a disruptor because the pharmaceutical industry may not like that, but it's work that needs to be done. We learned that during COVID as well, because it was the president of Madagascar that came forward to say he has found a cure for COVID in his country from their local indigenous herbs. And we were preparing to fight COVID in South Africa, but we were not investing in our own drug development. We're not investing in our own vaccine development. Yet we have the plants here, we have the people with indigenous knowledge that we could work with. That's what we found in other African countries. In Uganda, where government makes a public call. If you have something that you think can help in the COVID, bring it forward, let the scientists, so government put together a scientific team to investigate those things. And I think that's probably our way forward. We're talking equalize. We need to take that which has been marginalized to put in the center to provide solutions. No one says if you've not got matric, but you've got indigenous knowledge of these plants, you can't contribute a solution to our nation. And there's no solution that must be undermined. We'll just do the science. If it works, we'll say so. If it doesn't work, it's the same. So there's no pressure. Thank you for my 3 minutes. I'm grateful that in the team that's been put here together, we also have students that are contributing. And the next that I'm going to invite is Zagit Mkhize. She'll tell us about what she's doing. Thanks.
Thank you, Prof. Greetings to everybody in the room, as well as to the people that are joining us online. So my name is Zagit Mkhize. I'm currently a PhD student at the HIV Pathogenesis program, which is under the direction of Prof. Ndungu, and I'm also a Sante Fellow. So I'm currently wrapping up my studies now in virology, and I've been tasked to speak about PhD studies. I'm particularly interested in HIV research, of course, and I have been working on HIV for this is my 6th year now for my master's, which has led me to my PhD studies now. So I thought I'd start with a little story of how I landed in HIV research. When I was growing up, I was pretty good at science subjects, and I remember my parents always pushed me to go the science/medicine route. And HIV in particular, when I was in high school, my mom used to tell me stories about in the 80s and 90s how there were funerals every weekend. And every weekend in the townships and in the rurals, there were funerals. And I was quite young at that time, and I thought, wow, this is such a huge problem. And what can I do? And in going through university, I feel like when you do your undergrad, when you do your honors, it's kind of just a chore. It's something that you go through, you need to study, you need to get your degree, but when you're at PhD level, you really do research that, you're really passionate about, something where the fire really burns in you for you to do something, for you to find something novel to contribute in the field. So that is what I'm currently doing. And I think it's really important, as Prof. Magula mentioned, what's missing is the voice of the communities. And in my, growing as a young researcher, I've really been interested in science communication. And I think it serves a very, very important role in bridging that gap. We need to communicate our science to the communities which we serve. And that's one of the ways which I believe that we're going to get them on board and to lead and to hear their voices. It's going to be very difficult to get them on board if they don't even understand what we're doing and why we're doing it. So that's been really, really important to me, alongside the work that I do in the lab as well. I think another devastating thing for me with HIV is how young women are disproportionately affected. You know, my peers from 18, 23, 25, you know, those are the people that are disproportionately affected. And if we don't really understand that, and that's through engaging with the communities as to why are these young women disproportionately affected, then we won't be able to help them. So we won't be able to really get in there and make sure that the tools that we have that were mentioned, that they can actually use. And, you know, as Prof mentioned, I think in the beginning I was quite intimidated to be on a panel such as this one, but I think the voice of young researchers has also been missing. And we are the young future leaders of this country, as Prof Ndungu mentioned as well. So I'd also like to employ really other young researchers to use their voice. You know, in my time at HPP, I've really realized that we're capable of doing the groundwork. We're capable of speaking to young people. Young people want to hear from young people as well. You know, it's you know, as a young person, when my mom or my parents used to tell me something, I used to be like, oh, you know, and it's easy to rebel against an older person. So I think having young people like myself really speak to communities, engage with young people, understand them, and also be relatable to them, we'll be able to really, really get into their psyche. So with the theme of this World AIDS Day being Equalize, I really think that as young people, we need to continue to dream big. As Prof has said, we need to realize that we're able to do the groundwork as well and really, really make a difference in turning around, and not only the present situation, but also the future as the future leaders of our communities. Thank you.
The youth are speaking. Thank you very much, Zakiti. And I'm now going to invite Prof. Govender to come to the fore. He'll also tell us where he's from.
Thank you, Prof, and good day to all of you. My name is K. Govender, and I am the research director at HERD. And HERD is a social science unit. I'm not as young as the previous speaker. I'm much older, as you can see. So let me begin by saying, you know, and if I think, and my memory fails me a little bit, because if I think back to my younger days as a graduate student in the 90s and hearing about HIV, and I wasn't, well, I'm not a medical scientist or an epidemiologist as such, and when I heard about HIV, I thought, well, how does this concern me? Because I'm a social scientist, and it's a disease, and if you provide the appropriate information to people, problem solved, and people get on with their lives. Little did I realize, well, I was a young student then, right? So I wasn't scholared in the traditions of anthropology and sociology, still learning my way. That HIV is not a disease, it's an illness. It has a social facet to it. And it took me a while to register that as a young graduate student. And the catalyst for that thinking began when we invited a guest from another institution to talk about HIV, and he gave us the sense that, you know, we need to work in an interdisciplinary way to understand and confront this issue. And hence, over the years, I started to get a sense that when we're talking about HIV, we're not talking only about it as a biomedical illness. but as a social illness, an illness that impacts on gender inequalities. It has a poverty dimension. It has a masculinity dimension and a femininity dimension. So, in that sense, HIV as a social construct has become more apparent through the 4 decades of our work and the fight against this pandemic, this epidemic. And in thinking about talking today, I had a look at some of the work that we do at HERD. And HERD, we undertake social science research and health economics research in South Africa and Southern Africa, focusing on HIV and sexual and reproductive health. And just to reflect on some of the key, I'm going back to my tradition as a behavioral scientist to look at some of the areas and some of the kind of headline findings or things that stand out to me in current and past work. And the three areas of kind of insights avail themselves as I was looking through our past work. What is the evidence saying, and some of the simple takeaways that we can base actions going forward. Firstly, there's the issue of gender inequalities, and that affects the lack of access to HIV and SRH services. And that's an important area for us to look at. It's been mentioned by previous speakers. Gender inequality drives this epidemic. A second and related issue is a growing concern that there's a lack of involvement of men and boys in participating as service users themselves, as partners in sexual relationships, and agents of social change in dealing with HIV. We've neglected that realm to some extent, and we are battling with the question of how do we engage men in the epidemic? On what basis do we do that? What are the issues that we need to confront to do this? And this is an important consideration for us to take forward. A third area relates to the issue of the challenges that sexual minorities have in accessing health services. The prejudices, the stigmas, and the discrimination in terms of laws and practices, and makes their health journeys very precarious in accessing prevention and treatment services. So, if I look at some of the evidence from some of the studies we've done, and we've done with partners in the room, in 2017 and 2018, we undertook a survey in DREAMS-related districts. Do you know what DREAMS is? DREAMS has been an HIV prevention initiative sponsored by PEPFAR. And we focused on adolescent girls and young women in these areas. And DREAMS is a multifaceted intervention. It focuses on HIV testing, social asset building, comprehensive sexuality education. There's a component on parent risk mitigation mechanisms. What we found that one kind of simple headline finding: the more interventions that adolescent girls are exposed to, the less likely they are at risk for HIV. So we cannot think about interventions in a siloed manner. We've got to look at combination prevention interventions for us to make impacts. Adolescent girls who are exposed to a less number of interventions obviously had higher risks associated with HIV. Adolescent girls who were exposed to sexuality education in school were less likely to be at risk for HIV. So what's the simple message? Keep children, keep girls, keep boys in schools for as long as possible. It's a risk mitigation measure. And I think that has to be a universal application. Secondly, we are undertaking, we come back to the point about young men. So we are undertaking some work with UNFPA in in 5 countries in East and Southern Africa, and we're looking at how can we engage young men and boys in sexual and reproductive health and HIV services. And we are looking in countries in rural and urban districts, Zambia, Zimbabwe, Uganda, Lesotho, and Malawi. And what we're finding, our evidence is showing that men have very traditional stereotypes. They support this notion of a traditional masculinity, that that in relationships they need to make decisions regarding sexual relationships. They need to make decisions regarding important issues in the household. We've seen concerning levels of gender-based violence and intimate partner violence. So there's clearly a need for us to be engaging with and looking at interventions to bring men into programs. And we need to confront the challenge of how do we do that. When we ask men about services and getting to services, one of the issues that they talked about is that they like services where they feel less stigmatized when they attend, services where they feel less prejudiced, services where there is more confidence, confidentiality, and non-judgmental behavior in the care of health staff. So there are certain signs and certain ways that we can engage men, and I think we need to look at that going forward as well. A third area that I've mentioned that we need to focus is on sexual minorities, and there's a broad category. I mean, UNAIDS refers to this within an encompassing term called key populations, and within the term of key populations is MSM, transgendered groups, also sex workers and injecting drug users, and sexual minorities is a subcategory of that. And we are currently undertaking some work supported by the SADC HIV Secretariat in 3 Southern African countries. And what we are doing is we are going into communities where there are transgendered and MSM individuals and looking, who are also HIV positive. So they are dealing with what we refer to as intersectional stigma related to being HIV positive and living with HIV, but also stigma related to gender identities and sexual orientations. And this is kind of compounded or multiple or complex. And we are seeing that these kind of compounding stigmas impact on adherence to ARV medications. So there's certainly a mental health and a psychosocial element to being well. And we're finding that the health journeys of these individuals in different communities is very precarious. It's very fragile. It's they shoulder huge burdens in dealing with the HIV illness. So at some level, we have to make services more friendly and more appropriate and more available to sexual minority communities. We have to look at laws and legislations that decriminalize same-sex behaviors, ID drug users, people who undertake sex work. It's really important for us to look at the laws and policies, work with governments, work with parliamentarians to enable us to repeal these laws and make environments more humane for people to enable their identities and seek health services. So colleagues, in just kind of sampling some bits of the evidence, these are the 3 points and the 3 kind of important areas I think we should intervene in taking the conversation towards the 2030 goals. Obviously, there's a lot of challenges that come with it, but it requires our thinking and the thinking of youth and young people in communities. I think colleagues have noted this previously, that the success for HIV campaigns is grounding our activities and programs in communities and being able to have conversations to say, We don't know how this works. Let's get together and let's solve this problem in a holistic way. Thank you, colleagues.
Thank you, Kay. Okay. Do we continue? Oh, wow. That's a great mechanic. Okay, thanks. Last but not least is gonna be the SRC rep, Nontobeko Luthuli. Whatever message you have, it's not about handing gifts. And then we'll have a dialogue, a discussion. Thanks.
Greetings, everybody. My name is Nontobeko Luthuli. Doing medicine, doing my 4th year this year, and I am the college representative of the MCRC 2022 and 2023. It is my honor to be invited to such an event. We really support the initiative. It is very important, and my message today to everyone who is fighting the battle of HIV, to everyone with family members who are also fighting that battle. We are together in this fight. Let us support each other. And to the youth, guys, let's protect ourselves. Let's test. Let's be responsible. We are the ones who are going to help in decreasing the number of infections each and every year. To the old people who are infected, you guys are an example that it is fightable. So to the youth that is also infected, this battle is not it's not a death sentence to you guys. You guys will live with it, and you guys will fight the battle and win it. Thank you so much for the time.
I'm grateful to my panelists that we've managed to save time as much as possible, which allows us to have some conversation. And so this is open. You will need to raise a hand and make your question or comment, and then you can say who it is directed at. Yeah. Thank you. So that's one hand. Second hand. 2, 3, in that order. So 1 is here. So we're gonna make you run around now. So 1, 2, 3 in that order. Thanks.
So hi, good morning. I'm Stozi Lishangase. I'm a former first year medical student. And my question is directed to Ms. Mkhize. You talked about having the youth and everyone more involved in changing the mindsets of everyone else's, more especially in our communities. So my question is, how now do we go about doing that? Because in all honesty, young people are not very active or serious in the manner of fighting such an illness, you know. For say young girls now who take contraceptives like an injection, they won't use protection like condoms because all that matters is that I'm not pregnant, you know. So that's all that they care about. That's all that most young people care about. It's just the drugs, the alcohol, the hype of everything else that's going around. How are we now, as the minority of young people that are trying to be in the fight against all of this, going to stay encouraged and actually try and get all these young people on board to see that caring about HIV and other illnesses doesn't only start now when you are infected, you know.
Don't respond. Don't respond. Get the mic to number 2. Just note the question. Number 2 is at the back, sorry. And then 3 is here. No, at the back, the lady with the glasses.
Good day, it's Eleanor Langley from the HIV and AIDS program. And the question is really to everybody. The one thing that I did hear that, and I was very encouraged about the Paris conference and the one that we've just, the Spain one as well. But right now, we are looking at interventions and the way forward. The issue of us in the fast-track cities looking at U equals U, we've been plugging that issue, but we have had our team ask about condoms. And our team is saying U equals U and the use of condoms to continue. I have 2 questions, Prof, if you don't mind. The second is that there was one of the speakers that spoke about behavior and about interventions. We in the team provide mainly prevention. And so I'd like everybody maybe at some point to make a comment on the issue of us continuing, because in the way forward we want to know what kinds of interventions are good, because we do a lot of raise talks and stuff like that, and we are continuing with that. And we think that that is the best way that we can reach out to young people, by having campaigns and raise talks. Thanks.
Thank you. So there's a question for Prof. Magula, and I'll give Babu Mdletshe and Kay to respond to the second question about behavior interventions. And the third one?
Thank you. I'm Lenine Liebenberg. I'm based at Caprisa. Oh, excuse me. So you can all see me. Let's do this again. I'm Lenine Liebenberg. I'm based at Caprisa. Many here mentioned the disproportionate burden on women, and young women in particular. But I was very interested to hear about what Prof. Govender mentioned about the role of men. Yes, there are many interventions available, mostly driven towards women, but sometimes we forget that, you know, men are part of this as well. In line with the discussion about the involvement of community and the importance of scientists in particular listening to the community, Prof. Govender, you mentioned the voices of men already. It seems like we know what men would prefer, what sort of SRH service needs to be provided. Men need to feel comfortable. It needs to be a man-centric, man-friendly space, should not be judged. So there seems to be a picture of what men need in order to be more involved in SRH services and maybe even clinical trials, clinical research. So how do we bring it about? This isn't this isn't something new, right? We've been hearing about the missing men for many years. We've been hearing about the dialogues that need to happen, getting men more involved. How do we do that? It sounds like their voices are coming out, but who's listening? So that's my question about the next step.
Thank you. Now I'll start with question 1, Sagiti.
Hello.
Sorry, and just mention the reason we ask you to stand is because of the live stream. We want the cameras to catch us, that those who are online can see who's speaking.
Thank you for your question. I think the youth is a particularly difficult group of people to deal with, especially today. To answer your question though, in how can we do what we can to really try and circumvent, you know, the new infections, especially that we're seeing among the youth, is in the approach. As we all know, HIV is no longer a death sentence, which is great. That's amazing. I think that a con that came with that is that a lot of young people don't think it's serious anymore. They think that it's just like having diabetes or any other chronic illness. So I think in our approach, it's really to go back to educate. I think, which also Prof mentioned, you know, younger people that stay in school for longer, etc. We need to educate them of how having HIV, it's better to not have HIV than to have HIV. You know, as we know, young people take contraceptives as you measured to prevent pregnancy because they think that's important, but it's just as important to stay negative. I think also with educating with the interventions as well, young people really need to know about them and also trust them, which I think comes with getting the communities on board. You know, with these certain interventions, they need to trust them. And, you know, we saw with the vaccine how there was a lot of mistrust between scientists and people not wanting to take the vaccine. So they need to trust us, and we also need to approach them in a way that they can receive. We also, as young people, need to amplify our voices. Social media is great in doing that now. We can reach literally the whole continent. So I think we really need to also come together as young people who are passionate about doing this, to brainstorm ideas in doing so. But I think the approach is really important, and educating as well.
All right, thank you. I will respond to Eleanor's question and touch on a couple because they're all interlinked. So one of the 8 conferences, a theme to one of the 8 conferences that comes to mind a few years ago was break the silos, if you recall that. The problem that we have, a huge problem that we have, is that of working in silos. The theme for this 2022 AIDS commemoration, I think, is about integration. And we have to integrate. What is happening is that we are all working in silos and we all talking to each other. We all know so much, but we're just sharing it amongst ourselves. Back in the early days of the epidemic, there were billboards all over that you would not miss a billboard about ABC. Abstain, be faithful, condomize. And so we then fought for medication because we thought that was the solution. But has medication really been the ultimate solution? So the equalize, which is the theme of this conference, speaks to the huge divide that we have in our country between those who have and those who have not. And back in the day, it was on the basis of skin color, whether you had access to certain things or you didn't have access to a particular education, a particular health system. But now it is on the basis of whether you have or you have not. And so it is when we integrate that we're going to find solutions. In terms of the Fast Track Cities initiative, it is really about taking the conversation to the community, understanding that it is when community understands. So when we, as the people who teach, know that we actually have to go to the community and have conversations about what UNAIDS 1990 is really all about. But more importantly, and this is something that I agitated about, excuse me, through the COVID-19 pandemic, is that the science does not seem to speak to the lived experience at community level. Because when we come with scientific solutions and say, this is what is going to end the pandemic, the COVID-19 pandemic, take this injection. And yet, we also talk about the importance of ventilation. We also talk about the importance of hygiene and so on. And yet, we're speaking to people who do not have the means. to basically ensure that they can adequately social distance. When we say we're going on to lockdown, and some can go up into the supermarket and stock up their fridges and cupboards for days, and yet some have to worry about where they're going to get food because they can't stock up. So the virus now has come to serve a role that was there in the past that differentiated people by skin color. So when we're talking about equalize, we're talking really about breaking these silos, understanding what other people's lived experiences are. So that when we're talking about behavior change, we're understanding when we're saying this is a solution, but in my context, how do I apply this solution to my context? So yes, the U equals U is a huge solution, because U equals U also equalizes. It says whether you are living with HIV infection or you are not living with HIV infection, you actually have to be taking antiretroviral treatment. So it's a big equalizer. But now when we are not integrated, when we're not working together, and now we find ourselves with communities that are saying, where are the condoms? So why should we even be selling condoms? Why should you have to pay for condoms? And then there are stockouts where you could even get, government condoms, and then there are stockouts. So we actually have to hear and be part of communities at ward level. The work that's happening in eThekwini is just brilliant. It is really brilliant, where the conversation is coming from the community to the ward AIDS committee, the district AIDS committee, provincial AIDS committee, and SANEC ultimately. So work is underway. It's just we need to break these silos as scientists. Let's ensure that we have a means, that we're not going to communities to say, here's the solution. Let's all sit together and, deliberate on what the solutions are meant to be, so that we're not coming with a jab to say, or with a tablet to say, this is what you need. Let's hear what the communities are saying.
Thanks, Prof. Okay.
Thank you. I think you've covered quite length. I have my criticism of EU is equal U. Funny enough, I was chairing it when it first started the discussion, but anyway, I told them. U is equal U, the way how is it actually framed, it sends mixed messaging into our community and it creates confusion. But U is equal U is a very, very great campaign. It's just that in South Africa, we poorly conceptualize it and relate it to the context of South Africa. The danger of U is equal U, one part of it, it says now you are HIV suppressed. Yes, you cannot transmit HIV, that is true. So why should I use condoms? So let's do it without it then. That is a danger. That is what the ordinary people, that's what is happening. So one of the things that we said then to SANEC, one of the things we needed to do, you cannot talk about U is equal U without talking about comprehensive strategy on prevention methods. And also it questions the levels of our education in terms of HIV. Now it is a time then that we take our HIV education to the next level. We need to be starting to talking about reinfections. And the fact that there's a great possibility that yes, you were taking whatever treatment that you were taking, because now you are reinfected, there's a great chances also that you may need to change the current regimen that you are taking. These are some of the things that we don't even talk about at the moment. So when we talk about U is equal U, we need to talk about it in a comprehensive manner so that it does not send a different signal to our community. Thanks.
Okay. It's Men's Month, remember?
Thank you. Yes. On the question and the issue of men, and I'd like to concur with the previous speaker, this point about lived experience is so important. And sometimes we, as scientists,
we tend to be dispassionate, and look, there's an advantage to that. But when we engage in interventions, if we don't consider lived experiences, it's important. And what I mean by this in terms of men is that men are different. There's no one word that can encapsulate what's regarded as men. There are different sorts of men, depending on age, sexual orientation, geography, etc. So we need to understand these lived experiences for us to be able to intervene. And when we try to put it into a kind of encapsulating category of men altogether, then maybe sometimes we miss the point of the interventions. Look, it is difficult and challenging, but certainly the interventions with men that rely on lived experience, that rely on dialogues, that rely on where men can talk about their vulnerabilities and fears and anxieties, is an intervention, I think, that goes 2 steps forward, as opposed to us being prescriptive about what we should be, what men should follow. And this point about integrators is important as well. It's an intervention where we need to think holistically, not just about men, but men and their partners, men as agents of change within communities for health enabling norms. So these are some of the signals that should be part of programming or thinking about program. I hope that answers the question. Thank you.
I'd like to just add 2 points to address the concerns that have been raised by the youth, that there seems to be a lack of fear of HIV infection. So number 1 killer disease in South Africa is tuberculosis. And unfortunately, because we don't have data that speaks to how many people that have tuberculosis are also living with HIV that died, it appears tuberculosis is number 1. And after that is non-communicable diseases, cardiovascular diseases, diabetes, and so on. Now, if young people and I'm passing this message so that as young people, you also begin to have this conversation within your sector when, this talk of, you don't have to fear HIV infection. What is happening now is that because people are living longer, now the next killer disease is cardiovascular disease. Now, when you have cardiovascular disease, the most serious one, when you don't die immediately from a heart attack, is that you have a stroke. So now, if young people are not scared to get HIV and they're going to live long with treatment, they must also be educated that there are these complications that traditionally would occur in people that are older. But because now we can live longer with HIV infection, we have these complications that we now, together with HIV, now have to contend with. That you develop stroke, kidney failure, heart attack, heart failure, and all of this. So for people that are living with HIV, I'm not trying to push a panic button, but these are the realities that we need to also modify our lifestyle as we take medication to ensure that we keep the non-communicable diseases, the cardiovascular complications at bay. The other year, Eleanor organized a run, campus run, which was part of the UN AIDS awareness, 1990 awareness. So it's very important that our conversation move beyond the medication and know that we have to concern ourselves with the non-communicable complications. And so I forget what my second point was going to be, but importantly, please have these conversations amongst young people.
I just wanted to quickly add that I think the points about youth as well as men, I just feel like we as a society and as scientists, we haven't figured out how to deal with and develop programs that target the youth and men in a way that is effective.
So I think there's a big gap, in terms of developing programs that are attractive and send the message to men and to young people about issues around, for example, HIV prevention, wellness, and so on. And so I think there's a lot of work to be done there about what is effective, what will be effective, what are the effective strategies, so that we can develop strategies that are specific to these groups. And then the second one about U equals U. I just wanted to say also, I think, sometimes what we should be moving towards, in my view, is towards a more comprehensive well-being of society. Now that we have kind of dealt with the HIV problem to an extent. But it's not just about HIV transmission, it's also about sexually transmitted infections. And, just because U is equals U, therefore people are not using condoms, will not prevent, for example, a lot of infectious diseases. So we have outbreaks of infectious diseases. And some of these have long-term, consequences. And so we need to make sure that people understand that, yes, we have a very good tool in terms of suppressing viral load and in terms of HIV prevention. But actually, for us to live a healthy society with well-being over the long term, we need more than just U is equal to U, and that means using all the tools that we have available to prevent HIV and other diseases, and that includes responsible sexual behavior, for example. And that includes condoms, that also includes abstinence and all the other tools that we need to have a healthy society.
Thank you. I'll give Prof. Ngama just before. I just want to note at the hands. 2, 3. Okay, in that order.
Thank you so much, Prof. Galeni. It's Busingama. Mr. Mfleche, you spoke a lot about the last mile. 2030 is not far where we have to eliminate the HIV. I just want to know, how far are we in terms of the evidence? How far are we from eliminating it? Maybe Prof. Ndungu, you could also add. Thanks.
Thanks. Number 2, the blue shirt.
Good morning. Thank you.
Please stand up for the cameras. That's one next to you. It's mainly for people who are online, they can see you.
Okay. Yes, my name is Mahlatsi. I'm a student at ARI. So my question is with involving young people. So one thing about young people that get influenced most, it's social media and mainstream entertainment. And we see that if there's a trend, young people jump on it with challenge, hashtag this challenge, and they all do it. So how, in terms of HIV prevention and education, how, what's the strategy in using such platform of mainstream entertainment, whether through whatever form of influence or in the mainstream entertainment?
Directed at
anyone in the panel.
Mdletshe. Okay, that's fine. Just note it. Number 3.
Okay, thank you. I'm Londiwe Shando from ARI. I'm a social science research assistant. So for me, it's not a question, but it's just a comment. When I was still with SRC as a master's trainee, I was doing a study on maternal and child health for people living with HIV. So I was collecting data, doing in-depth interviews. So we were looking at the access to information pertaining mother and child health. So my comment is on the intervention, not specifically to maternal and child health intervention, but also for HIV. I believe the gap is on the top-down approach of the intervention that have been implemented in our communities. Because what we found out on that study was that men were complaining that they feel excluded on the intervention, because mostly of this intervention that are implemented are usually focusing on mothers and not on men. So maybe the best way to go on how can we include men is to develop programs that also include both genders. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, the first question was to Mr. Mlete and Prof. Tumbi. How far are we? I think there's 95 now, it's not even 90.
Sometimes these numbers, Prof, are quite deceiving. Numbers in terms of government, there's this thing of complacency and also the tick box that is happening. When you're sitting at the We AIDS Council, you can clearly see that actually we're not doing well in terms of response to HIV and AIDS. We are sitting right now with 13.5 new infections, 13.5 increase. Last year also it was 13.5, year before that it was 12, a year before that it was 12, a year before that it was 11, meaning HIV is literally accelerating. We are not capping the spread of HIV. New infections per week, we're still talking about more than 1,500 per week in South Africa. And then around plus minus 600 of that, 6 to 7 is coming here in KZN. And we are accelerating, we are not slowing down anytime soon. Yes, one part of it we are doing well in terms of initiating people on treatment, but we don't report sufficiently in terms of the number of people that we are losing also while they are on treatment. So if really we mean it to say, as I'm saying, we are in a last mile, so I don't want to act surprised in 2030 to say, oh, we didn't make it. I'm telling you now, we're not gonna make it. Unless we are serious about these things that we are saying, we initiate people on treatment, we support them. And we make sure that we also take care of the psychosocial issues of people. People are defaulting on treatment because there's not enough support at either might be in a family level, might be also at the community level. We do not have support groups anymore. HIV have changed. The people that are getting HIV today are young people. It is hardly to see an old generation of people who have HIV and survive the 2008, 2006 to see them defaulting on treatment because they saw the bluntness of HIV, skinning you alive. No one wanted to associate themselves with that HIV. The younger generation, they have not seen that, so it's irrelevant to them. We need the new lens then to interpret this to young people then to say, what does it actually mean? Taking treatment on a daily basis is not a joke, I'm telling you. I've been taking treatment for 10 years. Some days I can tell you that I feel tired of taking, I want to just to forget and go to sleep. But I have continued to take treatment because I know why I should be taking treatment. So that's the reason. We do not need to take treatment because the doctor says so. You need to find a reason of living on a day-to-day. Thanks.
I think it's very well answered. Maybe the only thing to add is that if you look at the global statistics, and UNAIDS sets these goals for number of new infections based on current, what we have available for HIV prevention. You can see that we are way behind, and we missed the target in 2020. And if the number of new cases continues dropping at the current rate, we will also miss the targets for 2025. So the idea that we will be able to eliminate HIV by 2030 is almost certainly we are going to miss those targets. So we need to be doing much more in terms of HIV prevention if you're going to meet the targets. And we are nowhere near the targets. Maybe that's the only thing to add to what Patrick has said.
Sagiti, technology.
Thanks, Mahlati. I think you just came up with a strategy on your own, which is what I was mentioning to the previous question, is that as young people, we need to come together and put our heads together and see, as young people ourselves, what interests us and what can we do to get other young people interested. So, I've taken it upon myself using social media on YouTube and other mainstream media as well, but I have a bit of a problem with it as well because of access. So, we live in South Africa, not a lot of young people have access to internet, and you need that in order to, be able to consume what we're trying to do. But I think for the most part, a lot of young people are interested in social media, so I think you gave the task to me in answering that question, and I'm giving it back to you. to start something like that, you know, do a challenge. I think as young people, we're pros and cons, but we are sheep generations. So, you know, one person does it, oh, it's cool, you know, it's trendy, let me do it too. Knowing your status, I think us in having relationships and dating, we need to make these normal conversations. They need to just be like, you know, what's your favorite restaurant? What's your HIV status? You know, it needs to just be a normal thing. And I think we're going to be able to do that if we start by making it normal, so that other young people can also see that it's a normal thing.
Thank you. There was a comment, so I will not. Are there any other comments, questions? Okay. It says, thank you so much for involving young researchers onto the discussion platforms such as these. It is encouraging for young PhDs and masters candidates to have their voice represented. From Nokukanya Tembane. Thank you. Okay, if there's nothing more, I'm happy we've been able to keep to time. There's another event we're going to, men's event at Howard College, so we've kept time. I would ask the organizers if they can present the gifts. Or shall I ask Prof K to sum up first, and then we present the gifts? Let's do that. Come, Prof. Oh, you want to sit there? Okay. Just a summation.
It's not a long summation, colleagues. I think the speakers have been succinct, and it seems that the key message is that we are way behind our targets, and there's a concern that we're not going to meet the 2030 targets if we don't invigorate the HIV prevention campaign, and we got to put our efforts to the wheel to get the HIV prevention back on the road. And the positive out of this meeting is that young people have ideas on how to be able to do that and enable that, and that's an important thing to take forward. So I should just say that a colleague talked about the NSP. The new NSP is a 5-year strategy, and it's the National Strategic Plan, and it's under development at the moment. So there's a consultation process that's being underway. So I would encourage people to participate in that and validate your concerns from that. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And as for me, is to thank you all for joining us online, and those who have come here physically for participating in this meeting. And thanks to the sound people, sign interpreters, thank you. And thanks, Prof. Nama, for opening us and welcoming us at this event. Other than that, we're going to share the gifts. I just want to say thank you. We've come to the end of this webinar. Thank you. Yeah, just go.